This is probably the most ridiculous story that I'm probably going to come across this week. And that's a police officer locking himself in the back of his own vehicle. So the star of the show is going to be Anthony Hare, and he is a police officer from the San Diego Police Department. And what former Officer Hare did was exceptionally stupid. During his time, I truly believe that his prefrontal cortex was out of order. So let's go back to that fateful night, August 14th or 15th, 2023, depending on your source. And let's take a look to see what happened.
Okay, we're just gonna go to my car right here, okay? Follow me. Is this car right here? On the other side of my car.
Now you can see that this woman during that time was being arrested, okay? I don't know for what reason she was being arrested, but nonetheless, somehow she made it in the back of a police vehicle. And as they were heading back to the police station, the dialogue began to get a bit spicy. And I'm not talking about flirtatious dialogue where she looks at him and then looks away while smiling. I'm talking about she just straight up asked him a multiple choice question.
Well, I can't hear you now. Don't say that right now. No, I said don't say that right now because everything's being recorded right now.
As you can see, she has the right to remain silent, but her mouth has an override feature. So this completely worked in her favor because as she was fishing, he ended up getting hooked by the bait. And of course, as you can imagine, it just went downhill from here.
What's going on?
His camera goes dark. Not because he turned off his camera, but because whatever he recorded obviously violates YouTube's terms of service. Nah, I'm just kidding. No, he actually did turn off his camera. That's absolutely insane to think that he actually turned off his camera thinking that he was going to be completely undetectable. As you guys know, when it comes to police officers, a body cam is not the only way that they can track you. There's also GPS, which by the way, that's how they discovered that he ended up parking in a residential street where he was quote unquote fiercely negotiating with this woman. And what's hilarious is that you can actually see the GPS tracking where he finally finds a residential street dark enough for him to parallel park in and commits to a decision that is most likely going to get him banned from family gathering. But after this situation, believe it or not, someone finally rescued him. And that was a fellow officer who heard the distress call and headed over to his vehicle immediately after.
Alright, sir, step out of the vehicle for me. Okay, hold on, let me turn my camera off. She's code 4? She's code 4. Okay, yeah, let me turn this off real quick.
Yeah, this is awkward, man. You know that moment where the waiter, he brings food to your table and then he tells you to enjoy your food and then you reply with, "You too"? It's like, how do you explain yourself after that? And when investigators picked up this case, of course they went over to Officer Hare to ask him, what happened to your body cam? And as you can imagine, Officer Hare, he came up with thousands of excuses. Oh, I forgot to charge it last night. It disconnected and connected to Bluetooth. I left it on airplane mode. Whatever the case is, he came up with an excuse. But it didn't matter because regardless of what he was saying, they investigated the camera and they determined that the camera was in pristine condition. So naturally, this drew up more questions than answers. And so they decided to go to the actual source, the former officer, Anthony Hare. They decided to interrogate him.
Okay, you mind just showing us?
Yeah, how you did it? So then I was like this, and then you want me to see how she was laying down, or
How you ended up inside?
so yeah, so she was laying down, her face was over there, and then I was just like kind of right here. I was like, well, at first I was like, hey, wake up. I was like, hey, you okay? Blah blah blah. She did like, so her head was facing towards that way. And then, so then this is when I was shaking her, and then this is when I went in, but then I don't know if I had my hand like this, and then something like that happened, and I kicked it with my foot like that, and then I was in, and then I was waking her up like this. I was like this, waking her up. While I was waking her up, I hear the door click behind me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, I was like this. And then when I found out the door was clicked behind me, I positioned myself like this. And I already knew that there was no door handle, but I was just like frantic. I was like, I can't get out of here.
Okay.
And then that's when she was able to sit up here, and then I told her you can stay there, blah blah blah. And then I was just like hunkered down like this on my side.
Honestly, man, if former officer Anthony Hare would have just said, you know what, man, I was practicing my self-arrest technique, and unfortunately, it worked better than I expected, I would have been like, you know what, man, that's valid. First off, this story has a tremendous amount of contradictory elements. I don't ever want to see an anime based off of this story, because witnessing such a story could potentially send your mind to the shadow realm. So the first contradictory element is your body cam. You were fiddling with your camera as shown in a clip where your hand is just streaking across the camera, and we can already tell that you weren't looking for the setting to set your camera in 4K. No, you turned it off. The second contradictory element is that you deviated from course. You headed towards the darkest alley or the darkest street that you could potentially find. Here's an image of that residential street. As you can see, the police vehicle is the one that's lighting up the entire street. Unless you were dueling Merrick or Yugi in the Shadow Realm, I'm not buying that you went there on accident. And neither did law enforcement. Once they concluded the interrogation and the investigation, the police report was filed. And as you guys can see, the police report is here. Now, I do want to go ahead and mention that this report states that this was alleged, which means that it has not been taken to court and he has not been convicted for this potential crime. But nonetheless, though, he ended up resigning 1 month after the whole incident occurred. And as you guys can imagine, this was exceptionally telling that there was definitely some sort of foul play going on. Because as it reads, on September 14, 2023, the respondent resigned from SDPD 1 day before his scheduled administrative interrogation. Administrative interrogations are interrogations that interrogate the staff or the employee that is being investigated. And whoever is the unlucky employee that's being interrogated, they have to provide evidence if they are working for that company. However, for Anthony Hare, since he resigned, he was no longer bound by that provision. At least I don't think he was. I don't know the law, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't continue the investigation. Unless, of course, it was a serious crime like murder, then I don't think they will follow up with that investigation. And that is why when you read that police report, it reads allegedly, because I assume that when he resigned, he no longer wanted any part of that investigation, or he didn't want anybody to interrogate him. So he was all like, fuck that, man, I'm out. Y'all can investigate that if you guys want, but don't put me into this. I was attempting to look for updates to see whether Anthony Hare was working for another department, but there isn't any updates on his story. If anything, it seems like the story concluded there, where he was just, he resigned, and that was it. Yeah, so that's the officer who locked himself in the back of his police vehicle and tried to escape from it. However, unfortunately for him, they ended up discovering that he was just lying the entire time, that he actually did probably screw that woman. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and end there. That's really all I have for you guys, and I'll see you guys next video.